Ekene, in disarray after the unexpected attack, arrived at the hospital with a determination to see Sandra, who had been on his mind throughout a restless night. His appearance reflected the morning's turmoil, but he had stopped blaming himself for failing to anticipate the assault. Inside the hospital, he crossed paths with the doctor who had treated Bola the previous day. The doctor shared the good news of Bola's recovery, but wisely refrained from probing Ekene about his injuries, sensing a potential violent aspect. Ekene's urgency to see Bola led him to the emergency ward. Bola, still on the path to recovery, greeted Ekene, noticing the cuts and bruises on his face. Concerned, Bola asked about the attackers, and Ekene's nod confirmed the intrusion. Ekene, filled with determination, offered to assist Bola in dealing with James, the relentless pursuer. He believed he could establish communication with James and help resolve the looming threat. However, Bola, aware of the danger, insisted that Ekene stay out of it. Bola disclosed that he owed James, who was involved in the drug trade, some money, apologizing for endangering Ekene's life and emphasizing the need for Ekene to avoid their shared residence. This explained Bola's unexplained wealth. The pressing concern of where he would go led Ekene to inquire about accommodations. Bola handed over his ATM card and PIN, instructing Ekene to withdraw cash from his account. Bola assured Ekene that they would discuss their next steps once he returned, noting the presence of an ATM near the hospital. Bola casually mentioned that a young woman had been inquiring about Ekene and had visited the hospital multiple times to check on him. Realizing it was Sandra, Ekene surmised she might have spoken to the doctor for information about his connection to Bola. Ekene's spirits lifted when he heard Sandra's melodious voice calling out to him as she arrived at the hospital. Her presence brought a smile to his bruised face. Concerned about his injuries, she touched his cheek, seeking an explanation for what had transpired. Sandra had spent a sleepless night grappling with her feelings for Ekene. Ultimately, she concluded that she genuinely liked him and believed he could assist in Angela's predicament. Thrilled by her touch, Ekene responded with a claim of a minor accident when Sandra hinted that someone might have come for him. He agreed to share the details later, recognizing that accessing the ATM was his immediate priority. Sandra guided Ekene to the ATM, mentioning the need to pick up Angela, who was eagerly awaiting Ekene's arrival. This revelation piqued Ekene's curiosity, but he followed Sandra willingly, finding her presence comforting and reassuring. Angela, holding a mysterious wrapped object that had aroused Ekene's curiosity earlier, awaited their arrival. Her face lit up upon seeing Ekene, and he greeted her warmly. Intrigued by the wrapped object, Ekene asked if he could take a look. To their surprise, Angela allowed him to do so, revealing a golden medallion with a fantastical appearance reminiscent of Alice in Wonderland. Overwhelmed by the discovery, Ekene hastily rewrapped it, exchanging a knowing glance with Sandra, indicating that they needed to discuss this enigmatic find later. The trio proceeded to the nearby ATM, unaware that one of James's henchmen had been clandestinely observing their interactions. The sight of the golden medallion in Angela's possession filled him with excitement, convinced it held immense value. Eager to share his discovery with his boss, he could barely contain his jubilation as he set out to report this unexpected development. James and his 4 associates arrived at the hospital's entrance in a massive Hummer Jeep. The urgency of the situation had been signaled by Jackson, who James had dispatched earlier to gather information. Jackson's text message, which read, "Be here ASAP," hinted at a significant development. James couldn't help but wonder what Jackson had uncovered. Had he located Bola, or perhaps the elusive roommate who had double-crossed them? He was certain that Jackson wouldn't have sent such an urgent message unless it was a matter of utmost importance. Despite the considerable amount of weapons stored in their Jeep, gaining access to the hospital was surprisingly straightforward. The security personnel merely conducted a cursory check of the vehicle's trunk and then issued them a gate pass card. This lax security made James contemplate the potential dangers of such vulnerability. Upon arriving at the hospital's parking area, James swiftly used his mobile phone to signal his presence, then leaned back in his seat, patiently awaiting Jackson's arrival. 6 minutes later, Jackson approached the vehicle. "What did you find out?" James inquired, noting the confidence in Jackson's demeanor. He was hopeful that Jackson had uncovered something substantial, and he had an appetite for intriguing news. Jackson's response was delivered with a hint of jest, as he mentioned seeing Bola's roommate exiting the emergency ward with a girl. It appeared that Bola had indeed ended up in the emergency room, likely as a consequence of the intense interrogation they had subjected him to. Suppressing his irritation at the jest, James prodded Jackson for more details. He knew Jackson well enough to recognize that he wouldn't be making light of the situation unless he had a significant revelation to share. Jackson went on to explain that he had followed the roommate and the girl, and his efforts had paid off. They had led him to a girl who exhibited unusual behavior, and in her possession was a valuable golden object. Jackson was convinced that this object held substantial value. James, however, couldn't immediately comprehend why this unknown girl would possess an object of such worth, especially within the confines of a hospital. Jackson hadn't contemplated this aspect, but he remained resolute in his belief that the object was valuable. James, now perplexed by Jackson's unexplained excitement, pressed for a reason to take this matter seriously. Jackson clarified that the object appeared genuine, and the roommate's reaction had underscored its importance. Moreover, he noticed some undercover police officers around them. Intrigued by the possibility of law enforcement involvement, James decided to delve deeper into this situation. He instructed Jackson to return to the hospital building immediately and discreetly observe the situation, with another member of their team, Bruno, accompanying him. While James might not ultimately be interested in the golden object, the prospect of retribution against those who had wasted his time was enticing. He also planned to deal with Bola once this situation had been resolved. Consulting his wristwatch, James hoped that they could conclude their business by evening. His anticipation grew as he expected a female visitor from Uyo later that day. While enjoying brunch together, Ekene recounted the events of his morning to Sandra, and in turn, listened intently as she detailed Angela's tragic situation. The horrifying story made Ekene seethe with anger, wishing he could confront Angela's abusive father. Sandra admitted that she had been unaware of the object's significance until the police showed interest in it. Ekene assured her that having the police around Angela was a positive sign, ensuring the object's safety. Concerned about Ekene's safety in light of the threats against his friend Bola, Sandra asked about his plans. Ekene explained that he would confer with Bola and follow his lead for the time being, uncertain whether his association with the girls would put them in danger. Sandra expressed her desire for Ekene to visit them once they left the hospital, and Ekene readily agreed. Her genuine concern touched him deeply. Sandra's phone rang suddenly, and she answered the call. It was Officer Audu, inquiring about the object's security. Ekene observed a man approaching them from behind Sandra. Though there seemed to be no immediate cause for suspicion, the man's presence piqued Ekene's interest. He noticed the man had one hand in his pocket. The man reached their table and calmly issued a threat, revealing that he had a concealed gun. He instructed them to stand up and walk nonchalantly toward the exit, cautioning that another accomplice by the door was even more ruthless. As they obeyed, Ekene couldn't help but wonder how these assailants had discovered his location. Fear gripped him as he worried for Sandra and Angela's safety, whom he had grown fond of during their short time together. As they reached the park, Ekene questioned Bruno about their destination. In response, Bruno brandished his gun menacingly, particularly targeting Angela. Ekene pleaded for her safety, vowing to cooperate. Observing the situation, two undercover cops who had been keeping a close eye on them followed discreetly, their guns drawn. Meanwhile, Jackson had alerted James, and their Hummer Jeep suddenly appeared, blocking their path. Before Ekene and the girls could comprehend the situation, they were forced into the Jeep. Surprisingly, Bruno chose not to join them in the Jeep. Instead, he turned and rushed back toward the approaching cops, opening fire. One officer fell with a fatal head wound, while the other was immobilized by shock. Bruno issued a chilling warning to the remaining officer not to pursue them or risk the lives of the 3 hostages. He then rejoined the Jeep, and they sped toward the hospital's exit. James, fascinated by the potential value of the golden object, attempted to take it from Angela, but she clung to it protectively. The situation had taken a dangerous turn, and James looked forward to unraveling the mystery behind the object, even if it meant toying with Ekene and the girls in the process.